to the Warriors and Crankstart and GoFundMe and Mega Black and all the folks who helped cover the cost to make this happen. So give them a round of applause. Ayana Moody from the Warriors was here earlier, walked through, and was just grateful to have us in space. I want to thank, whatever, I'm like Michelle, whatever you believe, I want to thank God, Mother Nature, or whoever for this beautiful day. But really grateful for this beautiful day. We are going to move into, so we want to make sure that before folks leave, that we, Michelle started us with this call to action, this challenge. And so want you to be thinking, because we're not going to leave here without people, fulfilling or following through on their pledge. And so we've got a little bit of a pivot in this afternoon. And so we're going to have a conversation today, and it's going to go where it goes. Really had the amazing opportunity this summer to meet Lakeisha French from Future in Color. Give it up for Lakeisha, Future in Color. And Lakeisha is working on collecting and consolidating and analyzing and understanding what it is to have a document that really captures the Black GDP. So when we started thinking about this, convening this time, we really wanted to have a conversation around community and culture and the financial economic impacts of communities, and to really drill down and begin to understand that a lot of time the culture, the design, the things that are so special and unique to a neighborhood or to, I saw Susanna earlier, I think about the mission, right? Like things that are very relevant to specific communities and neighborhoods, sometimes the people in those communities and neighborhoods don't get to benefit financially, right? And we talk about the booms that are happening, and those booms usually come with a level of gentrification. And really wanting people to start to unpack and think about like your financial value in your community, right? Like there have been these research studies that have talked about how communities of color or young people are the number one consumers of like social media or digital work or things that are happening. But when we look at who's actually creating content, it doesn't correlate. And that we need to be a little bit more intentional about, like even Michael Ford talking earlier about architecture and talking about folks who are coming from public housing, who's designing and developing the public housing developments? Because guess what? They don't just come in one day and say, here's a building. Like somebody's getting paid to design that, right? And what are the chances, based on the numbers that he shared with us today, that there are people that actually grew up in public housing designing future public housing developments, that understand what they need to look like or what was wrong with the development that they grew up in. And so really starting to think about how do we follow the dollar, right? And I think that is the piece that really resonated with me. And I was like, Lakeisha, we need to work together. You need to be in San Francisco. Everybody forgets that there are people of color, and I'll say specifically Black people in San Francisco. They do exist here. Might be a small number, but there are some people, who were born and raised here, apparently. We're not all transplants. But I just think this conversation, so I've asked Michelle G., who's done a tremendous amount of work around marketing and sales and talking to folks and knows, folks who sat in her session know that she's like Googling how many people are doing this or how much money is to be made in this area. And that I have often, thank you to the Blue Angels, I have often said, like, when we start talking about, for instance, in San Francisco, there is a requirement, right, for local business enterprises or to make sure that the first people that you give a contract to or that you favor are local businesses from San Francisco. And if you don't, they're supposed to get a waiver. And I've said we should really be looking at where the waivers are in San Francisco to determine what pipelines and jobs. And so there's apparently only one marine driller in the city and county of San Francisco. And so that person gets all the jobs that require like marine drilling, right? There are a lot of things within, so if you ever get a chance, and I'll try and find it, there's a list of all the departments that have gotten waivers to work with someone that is not a local business. And they have to go sometimes outside of not just the state, but outside of the country to get the good that they need.
Wow.
And so when we start thinking about businesses or workforce development, like we should be tapping into that. And so I just think the two of them together to have kind of this conversation around GDP, which I think for a lot of us, I'm like, I dropped that class in college. But like, how do we kind of like humanize that and begin to have the conversation in a deeper space? So I'm looking forward to, and I hope you enjoy this conversation with Lakeisha French and Michelle G.
All right. I took off my Nike flip flops for y'all.
Oh, did you? Yeah, okay.
All right.
Right
Why
on.
we get the after lunch session? This is not, this is inappropriate, right?
No, it's not.
Got it? Okay. In your handbook or bio or pamphlet, you can read
Yep.
Lakeisha French. Bio.
Right.
Also, you can read her bio. Let me just say this to start this off, and I'm asking questions, and I'm gonna give the floor to you to talk about this. Oftentimes we get so mired in the day-to-day of what we're doing and trying to build and all the things that we're doing that we stop being inquisitive and we stop asking questions and we stop, researching things and looking things up when before you would have to go pull out a dictionary or a phone book. Literally now it's on your phone and we spend so much time following other people's lives that we forget to build our own.
Yep.
So if nothing else, today is going to be a reminder that there are people that don't want us to talk about GDPs and what we're worth and how we build. So this is an honor and a privilege and a blessing to be able to sit in a room where people are diverse as this, talking about how do we grow. And Lakeisha's going to talk about some of the work that she's doing, but I really want you guys to pay attention because we already prayed no weapon formed. So it's up to you to release your mind and go beyond what feels comfortable, right? And let's really dig into what this notion of GDP means, why you're doing the research that you're doing, and some of the people that are supporting that conversation. So I would love for you to take the floor and just talk about some of the work that you're doing and why it's important to this audience right here.
Yes, absolutely. Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. This is one of the most exciting conversations that I'm able to have when I get to talk with entrepreneurs. I spend a lot of time in room with economists and anthropologists and forensic accountants and folks that study and do this work in the financial sector, tracking GDP. But for me, this work began as a conviction. So I'll share a little story and tell you how I got here. And let me first say that I grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey. I grew up in the inner city. My parents were working class. I began to explore entrepreneurship for myself at a very young age, became a serial entrepreneur, but had a really tough journey and trajectory. I would walk in rooms and I wasn't exposed. And so I started to feel the weight of that in my lack of like what you said earlier about graduating, right? So I realized I was doing a lot of activity, but there was little progress. And so I began to get curious and to start examining that. So that led me to become a what we call an entrepreneurship ecosystem builder, which just means that the work that I've done in the past 19 years has been to help build equitable entrepreneurship and innovation hubs in countries and cities around the world to ensure that Black and brown communities have a pathway to participate and to have equity and ownership in those spaces where they're building new things and tech economies. And so in doing that work, I was very heavily on the academic side. I work very closely with Georgia Tech and their Enterprise Innovation Institute. So I would see a lot of support for scientists and professors helping those scientists take their ideas that they've been working on and take them from concept to commercialization, right? And what's called R&D, research and development. But when I look at our communities, I don't see R&D. No R&D training. But I hear about culture all the time, right? But all I see is our culture being distracted, but us not getting credit for the things that we create and produce. And so this leads me to the GDP conversation. And so GDP, for those who may have skipped the class, is gross domestic product. And so simply, when I say Black GDP, let's just imagine the Black community was a country. It would just mean that within 1 year, it's the amount of goods and services that we produce, right? Simple terms. But GDP is a collection of labor, land, and capital, right? And so the Black GDP report that we'll have coming out next year was meant to measure, quantify the contributions of the Black community across industries and sectors, particularly those industries that will be leading in GDP by the year 2045. So we wanted to go into the future. Why the future? Because when we look at the year 2045, 2 data points. One, if you look at the latest census, US Census, by 2045, the US will be majority, well, there'll be a new majority. But that won't mean anything if we don't have the economic power, right? And so by 2050, the largest concentration of young people will be on the continent of Africa. The future literally is Africa. And so when I think about 2050 and 2045, we look at, well, how can we carve out and quantify what the Black GDP is? So we get this data report, but data is not enough. And so how do we backwards design our contributions to accelerate our GDP, specifically to make sure that when we get to 2045 and 2050, we have taken agency and had a role in shaping what the future looks like for us, economically, socially, and politically. That takes backwards design. I'm a design thinker, so I love backwards designing. But backwards designing, specifically looking at the sectors and industries that will create and transfer the most wealth over the next 20 plus years. Why do I say that to a group of entrepreneurs? Because as you're building your businesses or thinking about what business you're going to go into, how you're going to monetize your intellectual property, we should be looking at the emerging and future industries. It's not just AI, right? If you talk to somebody who's in the tech space, they're going to tell you the future is not AI, it is deep tech, quantum computing, right? I went to take my kids to a exhibit in Atlanta around space, and one of the girls that worked there, she's like, "Oh, did you check this film out?" And so there was something called a lunar colony. I was like, "Oh, that's exciting." And I thought it was, them dreaming it up. And she said, "Oh, no. They're actually working on building like the homes that will be on the lunar colonies." I said, "Oh, really?" So I just, I got curious. I said, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Well, who do you know who's, are there any contracts that have been given out for these, homes that will be on the lunar colony?" She said, "Oh, as a matter of fact, there are 2. One company's in Wisconsin, and they already have the intellectual property." So Let me pause for a second. So imagine before we use lumber to build, right? Somebody actually acquiring lumber probably for free or pennies on the dollar.
Right.
And then able to get contract and intellectual property, patents, trademarks. By the time we find out about the opportunity to get into the future of construction, we're gonna be the workforce.
And won't be able to afford to live there.
And we won't be able to afford to live there. So this is why the GDP is important. Why now though? Because as we look at technology advancement in the 4th Industrial Revolution, we have to ensure that we are not left behind. And we can't depend on anybody else to do that. And so the quantification of the Black GDP and looking at how the Black community has contributed economically to sectors and industries such as the creator economy, the music industry, space, manufacturing, real estate. Looking at the numbers is important because we need a paradigm shift. So often you see things happen like George Floyd's murder, moments like that happen where people want to give large influx of investment into our community. And that's a very emotionally driven response. It's a very privileged response. And so what my team and I started to ask was like, how do we move beyond this and have a sustainable, pathway? And so we want the numbers, data, right? Not just data, but my mentor used to tell me, know your numbers. Before you walk into any room, know your numbers. Know your numbers. We don't know our numbers. So we're at a disadvantage. Whether you're going to apply for a job, imagine the confidence, the agency that you'll have, that you'll feel being able to really truly negotiate and understand what your presence alone, not just your skills and your talent, your presence, the type of economic impact that'll have. For instance, Deion Sanders, right? The prime effect. You look at things like that. And so we don't have the numbers. You hear people say, oh my gosh, Black people are so resilient. You guys contribute so much to culture. But we haven't quantified it, because when you get in the investment rooms and you start talking about return on investment, it comes down to the numbers. And so that's the point of the report. But beyond the report, we want to bring that to life. So after we release the report, we're going to host, and Cheryl's going to be, where's Cheryl? Thank you. So San Francisco will be one of the first places where we'll host these salons. We want to have value creation salons. Why do I say value creation? We're not asking for handouts.
Right.
We're not creating a Black GDP report to show people and say, see, look what you can give us. We want to build. We've been building. We've been creating, right? But we want to make sure we're intentional, and we have to have a plan. If you look at any community and you talk about gentrification, there's been a 20+ year plan on that community. Where's our 20+ year plan?
Hello.
And so, but it's not going to come with this big movement and wave of the Black plan and the Black economic. It's not going to happen like that, right? It's just slow over time, getting the numbers, collecting the data, shifting the narrative, getting in rooms like this, talking to entrepreneurs, getting us to build in spaces where we are creating wealth. I'm just going to say this because I feel like we're having a family conversation.
Which are?
When the George Floyd murder happened, I remember looking at TV and also being on Facebook, and I'm still very much connected to people at home in Jersey. And I remember everybody being so excited and saying, I'm starting a business, I'm an entrepreneur. And they were having these pop-up shops, right, all in all these cities, and all of a sudden everybody was supporting it. And that's great, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I was like, I want my people to look, okay, if the floodgates have opened that fast, that soon, where y'all going? Where are you, right? There's space. You're building in different spaces.
Right.
And so we have to come together as a collective across the diaspora. And I don't say, and that's not just the Black community. The reason our initiative, our action tank, our think tank is called The Future in Color, because the future is color. The future is color. But if we do not realize that, if we don't increase our GDP, if we don't focus on value creation, access to wealth creation, not capital. You talk about access to capital, we don't have collateral. Okay, to go to base. So access to wealth creation tools, example, to sort of break it down. One of my first businesses was a summer camp business that I started when I was 20 years old. And I was teaching young people how to build business. And so that program is headquartered at some of the top universities around the world now. Is that what I talk about all the time? No, but when you are an entrepreneur or a nonprofit leader, I don't care what type of organization or social impact you're doing, you have to be creating value. That is the only way to close the wealth gap. You have to be creating wealth and value. And so I can right now, if I ran into a jam, I can open up sessions. I can sell my IP. I make sure, so real quick, and then I'll pause, but the main thing I want you guys to take away is not this high level Black GDP conversation, is how do you get more active in the Black GDP, get more intentional about what you're doing. And so we're looking at 4 pillars: innovation, right? Intellectual property. When you go, what are you creating? What have you contributed to your company that everybody says, oh my God, you're so good at this. And every time you put your hand on this, this happens. Start paying attention to those things. You have to monetize them. You have to protect those things. And then make tools of wealth creation out of those things. Innovation, advocacy. If we don't have policy, it has to end in policy. If it's not written, it's not so. Right? So we can do all the work we want to. So policy has to be there. ownership, not entrepreneurship, ownership. There's more than one pathway to owning.
Oh, yeah.
And investments. And so how are we investing? If you look at the healthcare industry, the future of healthcare in color, the future of space in color, the future of manufacturing in color, what does the Black community, what do our numbers look like in terms of investments or sitting on the stock market? And so in the Black GDP report, we will break down the sectors and industries, looking at those 4 pillars and quantifying the numbers so that we're able to then make projections. The reason for those projections is so that we can start shifting, and in those value creation salons, call these industries to the table as well as entrepreneurs to look at how we can accelerate the GDP. But that is going to require it to be centered around you guys, right? And so we have to be ready. And I'll pause, but I'm just really passionate, and I can sit here all day and talk about this because I truly believe it. It's not just a research report. It's not just data. It has been my real life. And it is a thing that I talk to my family about as well. Right. We have a lot of work to do. But we've been doing this. We've been creating. We just have to start leveraging. We have to organize.
So give us the 4 pillars, because you said a lot of, you said
innovation, advocacy, ownership, and investments.
Okay, got it. Because I also put tools and IP, and those are subcategories.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I want you guys to know, so Instagram makes about $5 billion a quarter on your stories, your narratives, and your IP, right? And so if you took some of that back, what could you leverage on that? So I just want to talk about the room, because you're having a conversation way up here about GDP and about work, and have to do something. So you're starting your business tomorrow. What are the 3 things that you're going to do when you launch that business in order for it to be sustainable, grow, scale, and all the things that you're talking about? Like, tomorrow morning, I'm gonna wake up and what am I doing?
The first thing you're gonna do is customer discovery.
Didn't I just say that, y'all? I just want to make sure I shoot on it.
The first thing you're gonna do is customer discovery. In my entrepreneurship programs that I used to teach, I taught scientific-based entrepreneurship to our community because we don't focus on that enough. So when I talk about the research institutions that I've sat in the room and really extracted from, to be honest, and I was like, oh, okay, this is great. So can you guys do this in our community? They go, oh, no. We only do that over, in other countries.
Oh, okay. Hello.
Like, true story. But they will not come to our communities and teach it. Customer discovery. I can't tell you how many tech founders I have passed in the hallways of Georgia Tech that have become good friends, and I see them maybe every 6 months. And they go, hey, Lakeisha, I'm like, hey, how are you? Nothing, I'm launching this, tech company, working on, okay, where are you? Doing some customer discovery, got about 100 interviews to do, 100, 200 interviews to do. By the time I finish doing those, I might even have to build this out.
So tell me, so how do they do that? Like, because I was asked a good question from my friend at lunch, and he's like, if you don't know what you don't know,
Right.
so like, you cannot leave this room, and it's been like, look, God says, you say something that now has been amen, right? You gotta know your customer. How do they do that? What questions? Because it's really important, because if you don't know your customer, what are you building or selling? What are you doing? Like, there's no end goal. So
Yeah,
I want you to dig in a little bit on that, because I think it's so
important.
important.
Oh, and if I would have known that, I could have did a whole workshop, Joe. We could have did a customer discovery. We could have done that. So, the first thing I'll tell you is to go look at Business Model Canvas, if you're not familiar with it.
Okay, are you guys writing this down?
Business Model Canvas.
Is it free?
Yes, you can go on YouTube. And you
That's
don't have
right.
to people host classes on it, but you can go on YouTube, and there's some nice animated videos they put up now, and just start at go on YouTube and then find episode 1 and then go from there. Business Model Canvas. It is a tool. The Lean Startup, if you haven't heard of it. There's a book called The Lean Startup, and it's based off of Steve Blank's course of how to build a startup. He's still a professor at Stanford University, where he's the godfather of startups. And before Eric Ries wrote the book Lean Startup, he wrote it based off of Steve Blank's course. Oh. And Steve Blank's whole purpose was to do exactly what I just said, is customer development. It's called the customer development process and customer discovery. Very simple, but if you walk in any startup, in any company, They have things all over the wall, and they might be $1 billion tech company, but they're still using business model canvas, and they're doing design thinking.
Yep.
Those two things. So look up design thinking
Yes, yes.
and business model canvas. I became a design thinker because I was fascinated with the fact that it focused on human-centered, right? To your point about knowing your customer. So in the design thinking process, there's 5 steps. You have to ideate, you have to empathize, ideate, prototype, test, and you bring it, it's a feedback loop.
You don't have to, they can go Google that.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
I'm also a teacher, I'll teach you.
Yeah.
I'll train you.
No, because I want you to get to the other two.
So,
Yeah.
so look up Lean Startup, Business Model Canvas. You might want to Google customer discovery, write all these down. And what you want to start with is about asking the right questions. It's not about asking questions, it's asking the right questions. And a simple way to start is with the one word, why? If I were to ask you a question right now and say, somebody give me an example of a business, tell me about your business.
Wall Street education.
Wall Street Education. Who do you serve?
Supposedly African Americans first, but people of color and women.
Women, ages,
Ages 3 to 93 or 103.
okay. Is there anybody in here interested in Wall Street Education?
Yep.
Okay,
Sit right next to me.
okay. So if you were to ask her a question right now and just say, if you said, well, how long have you been interested in doing this? And she would give you an
How long
answer.
have you been interested? About a week. Okay.
Okay. And then,
Why?
To understand money trends more,
why?
because I don't have a good retirement,
Why is that?
because I want to eat.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In about 10 years, I want to live.
You want to live.
Yeah.
Right, you see how that's much different than your first response? If you get to the core of it, that's understanding your customer. So that empathy, the first step is empathy. So if you look at design thinking and the lean methodology are very similar. You start with empathy, understanding why. If I were to tell you to go find, look at somebody who's homeless, and if I gave you $1 million, what would you do? And these are called design sprints, right? So you can look this up too, design sprints, but you can do this with your own business idea, and I recommend that you do. That's the first thing you can do when you go home, is to do a design sprint on your own business. You can start with 5 customers, you can start with family members or existing customers. But you want to ask the right question, but you want to ask why generated questions to get to the core of it, because a lot of the times that person may not be your customer, right? They may be a consumer of your product and not a customer, right? There's a difference between a consumer and a customer, and the business model canvas helps you figure that out. So start with empathy, start with why, asking the right questions. I would say start with 5 people. My recommendation is talk to 100 people about your business. Come up with maybe 5 questions that are centered around the why and get in a little bit deeper. And then what you go and do is you go build, or if you have a product already, and then you come back and say, is this what you meant? Like, does this help you? And you ask those questions. So that's a process. And it sounds so simple, but it is a moneymaker. Like, it gets to the core. So they'll tell you the best tech companies and startups solve the simplest problems, and that's how they get to the root of those simple problems. So you may have a business and you may have 5 different products running right now. I would challenge you to boil that down. Right? I'm not saying that you can't launch other products, but I would focus on understanding, almost create an avatar. Like, take a piece of paper and draw a person, and draw me like who is your customer? Like, you give me very general answers when I ask you who your customer was. You should know what they eat for breakfast, what time they sleep. And so those are the types of things. And so knowing your customer, what drives them. And every time you launch a new product or service, you should be going through this process again, because that's a completely new business. It's a completely new business. So a lot of people make a mistake. They invest money in manufacturing or buying more products or expanding outside of different markets, and you haven't gone through the process of creating a business model. And the purpose of the business model is to create profit. And then you'll see in the middle of the business model canvas, there's something called the value proposition. So almost like I used to draw a little thing like a heart. It is the heartbeat. That's the whole sole purpose. Everything you do around in your business is for the purpose of delivering that value proposition to your customer segment.
So do you start with the customer and then build the business model, or you build the business model and then find the customer?
You start with the customer. You start with the customer. If you have, since we're talking ownership, if you are acquiring a business and they have already identified the customer, so either way you're starting with the customer, right?
Yeah.
It's just, you may not want, you want to get to know that because things have changed, right? You might acquire a business who, built that business based off of 10, 15 years ago, and it's a totally different world now. And so you need to go through that same process.
Yeah. And even if you have a nonprofit, listen, you still are serving somebody. So it's the same process. And I bet you at least 90% of people in here, you had an idea, you're gonna put your little business model together, it's on a napkin or something, you're like, oh, I'm gonna build this out, and my product's gonna be dope. I'm gonna be helping all kinds of people because I'm from the town or San Francisco. And then you build a model that really nobody wants your product because you didn't start with the customer. So I love that. So you start with the customer, number one. Two,
You build the value proposition out.
Yep.
So a good way to start with the value proposition is to Google, look up the golden circle. Anybody fans of Simon? Okay, you'll see look up the golden circle. He has a nice, cute video. The golden circle is 3 circles, and it starts with is why, how, and then what. So let me give you, for example, Apple, right? If you think of an Apple commercial, have you ever seen an Apple commercial and have you heard them explain, like think of the iPad or the iPod or, the iPhone. Do you ever hear them explain and talk about those products in the commercials? What do you see? But more importantly, I think we talked about this earlier. Now, what do you see in the commercial?
The customer using it.
What'd you say?
The customer using it.
The customer using it, but also the feeling after, right? They take you through a story, through a journey. It's the emotion. So I remember like the iPad, the FaceTime, like the first FaceTime commercial, and they didn't say a word because you saw at the end was the FaceTime thing show up, but it was 2 parents and their daughter went away to college, and they showed all these pictures of memories, and they showed them taking her to college, and then they showed the parents at home kind of lonely, and they showed the daughter sitting there, and then what did they do?
Party.
The FaceTime.
Oh, yeah, with the
And then the parents were able to see their child, which at that time, that wasn't possible. If you went to drop your kid off at college, you had a hard time, really connecting with them or seeing them. And so you felt that if you were a parent in that moment of ever taking your child to school or just having an adult child where you don't get to see them, the power of being able to pick up a phone and see their face was powerful. And then you just see FaceTime or and it's like, oh, wow. But that's the golden circle. They start with the why, the how, and then the what is the last thing. So I'll take it a step further. So that's how you get to value proposition. You begin to get to value proposition by focusing on the golden circle. Start with the why, how, and then what. But do the same thing for yourself as the founder and entrepreneur. So I always tell people, I call it personal value proposition, your PVP.
what was in my session? Come on, tell me what I'm talking about. This is so good.
And so start same thing with you. Start with the why. So if I ask somebody a question like, I'm just gonna pick on somebody. You just said my view. Okay. So introduce, tell me about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Saida Tufu Birch, and I am an organizer, an activist, and a disruptor of white supremacist ideology.
Okay. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Right? That sounds good. But I wanted you to tell me your why first. Right? So try to reverse engineer that.
Okay.
So the last thing I want you to tell me is what you do, how you do it, but I want you to start with why, like your purpose. So because you could be in any role, but why, when you show up, your fingerprint, why, what's your why? And I think you said, because the last thing you said, I'm a disruptor, right? And so I would probably say that first, I'm a disruptor, but the last thing I would want to hear is your title or, the work that you're doing, right? And so it's the same thing with a business. And so as founders, a lot of the times when we don't have that approach to ourselves and are building up of ourselves as the founder, entrepreneur, the person that's going to execute this business, it's a lot of the times reflected in your business model. So we have to do dual work as we're doing that.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I always like to mess with people. They're like, oh, you jump on a plane and you sit there, like, oh, what do you do? And I was like, change the face of, like I just say something like, oh, I meant, what's your title? I was like, oh, but that's just like, that's not who I am. That's just what my title is. Yeah, you like to mess with people. Okay, so I love that. Everyone got that? Number one, know your customer. Number two, you have to have your value proposition, and what the world wants you to do is lead with your title so you can get away about the impact that you're gonna have. The iPhone commercial was about the impact that the technology had on your family, your life, building relationships. It had nothing to do with the piece of equipment that was.
That's why they get our money.
That's why they get, exactly.
Over and over again.
Number 3,
They don't get. They pay me.
We'll get really practical. Go onto the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office website. There is a course that you can take for free, and they will pay for your trademark
Wow.
if you take the course.
Yeah.
It's the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office.
Didn't see.
A lot of times it's about access to information and knowledge of knowing things. Protect your intellectual property. What you have between your two eyes is the most important piece of real estate that you own.
but do you need to trademark it, or do you just need to?
I'm like, where's the course?
I don't think everything needs to be trademarked, right? I think some things do in certain industries, but some things you just need to create your business, do your LLC, and you.
With AI and technology, I would say yes.
No, AI and technology, absolutely. If you're trying to, launch a consultancy, probably not. So I just want you guys to know, everything doesn't, my husband's an attorney, thank God. So everything you do doesn't need to be trademarked, but in certain instances it does, and that's great information to know that.
You know what, I would say.
Because it costs a lot of money to get something trademarked.
It does, but this is part of our work, right? Us as ecosystem builders and to try to break down those barriers. I would say yes, right? I would say yes. I would say if you go home and you think of an idea, whatever you can protect you never know. And that's part of building, that's part of wealth building.
Wealth building.
It's like an arsenal. Even if you never use it, but to your point, the cost. And so that's when we get into the barriers in our community not having the resources, and we should. And because we don't protect things, or we go out and we share information, we go work for a company, we consult, we give advice, and we create new models and paradigms, and we don't realize it. We're just talking, being who we are, right? And there's so much value and wealth in that.
Well, and more importantly, if you work for a company, you don't realize in their bylaws, it states anything that you create, when you walk in that door, must be left there.
And it's time to renegotiate that.
Yeah.
Right.
Or if you have a great idea, give them everything else and hold that one back.
That's right.
So when you walk out, you can take it with you.
That's
And take it with you. And so which leads me to social capital.
Yeah, that's a great segue. I didn't even mean to do, I'm so good at what I do.
I caught it. I was like, she was going there. Social capital.
That's
The
right.
next thing that you need to do.
Yes.
So protect your ideas, especially if you have, to your point, a product, a piece of technology. But I would say a lot of us, we think, oh, because we're in the consulting space, because we're in the thought leadership space, because we're in the nonprofit space. No.
Right.
Think twice before you go. Even if you work for a company, but before you go and present an idea to your boss, show up differently in that conversation.
Yeah.
I want to talk about something I've been thinking about. Don't go and say, I want to do this, because in their defense, you presented it as an employee.
Right.
Right? You didn't come to me and say, can we go out for lunch? Can we have a conversation? And so I've been thinking about the work we've been doing, and so I've been working on something, protecting it right then and there. So to your point, you don't always have to have a legal, there's ways to do that.
Come on, sis, and some people you don't have that conversation with
And
at all.
some people don't have it at all.
Right, like you gotta have the spirit of discernment when you wanna share information.
Amen.
The matter of fact, you need to look around this room and find you a budding mentor, somebody that you can feel comfortable with having a conversation, because these people are out to steal, kill, destroy, and then we'll look at you in a meeting and be like, oh, did you say that?
Right.
I didn't remember that. Come on, that's so interesting. Like it was literally last week.
No, right. Wait a minute, you about to bring the Oakland out of me, I'm about to get mad. No reason at all.
But the other piece, so social capital, and then the other piece of it is execution.
Yeah.
Be a doer.
Yeah.
So this is what we were talking about earlier down there, when we were saying, the difference between busyness
Yeah.
and productivity.
Yeah, I want you to dig into this, okay, because This is so important. We feel like, I hear it all the time, when I put in the work, well, was it smart work?
Right.
And was it work that's going to get you what you built your why for? Because you understand your customer, you know what you're doing, right? So this is like, if we don't do anything else, if y'all are spending 12 hours a day on something that's not gonna get you anything, shame on you. So come on, sis, preach a little bit before we gotta get out of here.
But, you know, so somebody asked me a question one day, I think we were on the Zoom, and they were like, hey, like, how's your week going, or how's your day, something, and I was like, oh, and I started to say, I was so busy, and I paused, and I thought, because I know, like, the work that I was doing, I was being very intentional, you know, I was proud of myself. I said, you know, it's been a productive week, actually, like, I'm tired, but it's productivity, it's a different type of tired, like, I'm not weary, you know, I'm not running the Red Queen's race, I'm not running in place. Like it's been very productive, and because it's been productive at every juncture, there's more to do because I'm moving the needle.
Because there's measured
outcomes.
Yes.
And you have to be moving the needle. So I would say take inventory. You know, hold yourself accountable, or find somebody around you that's gonna hold you accountable. I know for me, it's my mama, you know, and so it drives me crazy. But I'll call her sometimes just to say, put something out there. I say, you know, I'm gonna do this because I know she's gonna hold me to it. And say, well, I thought you said, you know, and so I'll make sure that I'm sort of keeping that there because I'm constantly having ideas, right, come up. So I would say busyness is letting the tide take you, right? You wanna surf, you wanna navigate, right? You wanna take, and that requires you to take a step back and take an examination of the ecosystem, the community, the resources, the people around you, the social capital, the activities happening around you in your community and your family. And if you're in a specific sector or industry, you should be, and I won't say don't just look at that industry, but also look, you know, on the side and look at what's happening and direct your activity or what you're doing towards making sure that, okay, tomorrow I'm gonna talk to some people in the energy sector, you know, I'm gonna try to build a relationship with somebody there, I'm gonna try to, so that way if you're on the phone or if you're online looking up folks, or you cold emailing or calling, or if you're asking somebody for a favor, you're being intentional. And so again, this goes back to backwards design. You gotta have a plan. I know that's not a sexy thing, but you have to be intentional. You don't have to have like a 3 or 4, because if somebody tells you to write a business plan, I'm just gonna tell you flat out, this might not be a popular opinion. When somebody says, where's your business plan, or write a business plan, I automatically know that person does not, like, they're outdated. Because you only need a business plan if you're operating a business. If your company cannot function when you're not doing something in it, it is not a business. You have a startup. That's a big difference. So look at what you're doing, right? And sometimes that's because we're not being productive, we're being busy. And so we're not really building out. And so you're just constantly stuck in startup mode, right? Where you have to be, we need more time to focus to work on our businesses and not in them. But this also goes back to your point about the resources, right? And so if you have to work a job and you have to do this, it's really hard to work on your business. And so I call it the freedom to fail. And that's the type of funding we need. That's the type of support we need to give us the freedom to be able to fail. So all these things we just said, I just want to just make a note of that. Like, all this is great, but we realize you guys also need the support from the ecosystem builders, the organizations, the people that are saying that we're doing work to help Black entrepreneurs, right? But we need to have these conversations. So we did some research. We got a grant. My company partnered with Morehouse College and Georgia Tech. And I'm just going to say this. My experience at Georgia Tech, I dealt with a lot of racism when I was working with them. And we've had candid conversations about this. I was a small business that was on a federal contract with the Department of Commerce, and our goal was to build what's called the hub. And we were connecting the regions from Florida to Kentucky so that minority businesses, this was the MBDA, Minority Business Development Agency, so that minority businesses could grow across regions. So for instance, if you're living in Florida and you're building a business in the energy space, and Georgia or Atlanta has a class or course or funding or accelerator that can really help and support you, you may not have the money to go or the wealth to go and move to Atlanta, move to Georgia for a few months to access those resources. So how can these hubs and accelerators and incubators work together to provide resources across region and create a hub where you're able to access those resources? Within this, we did some research and they were a little bit against it. And so we asked, like, we want to just talk to entrepreneurs, and we talked to over 100 entrepreneurs going back to the customer development. And we said, what would you have needed when you got started to give you time to work on your business, to build a sustainable business model? Like, what's that? And we wanted to get to the number, like amount of money. You know how much it was? Like, that would sustain you for a year to be able to work on your business. I don't think it does.
$60,000. It's not a lot.
30,000.
It was $25,000.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
Which is sad, right? It's like, that's,
Do you think they knew?
they didn't. No, and then, but here's the point of asking the right questions. And we had to do a lot of, we did like these interviews, and it was hard because it would have been easy to send a survey or like what everybody does. And we took time, and some people were pissed, like, why is it taking so long? And we were like, we want to sit down with them, like, and get to, and we looked at their books, and we looked at, and like, what is that number you would have needed? You know why? Because we wanted to go to the MBA and say, that's fine that y'all are putting funding behind these, you keep putting out these RFPs for proposals and all these different solutions you're trying to build. But can you just give the entrepreneurs that are, just give them $25,000?
It like cost you more to actually build the model.
To build the model than to do, and they didn't like that. But anyway, we put it in the report, but little simple things like that. And so, with social capital, protect your IP, research and development, R&D.
It really is down to Google. Or if you have a child in college, something they ask some of their classmates, like focus groups and information can be gathered from a number of people that we're saying R&D because, listen, I work for some of the business companies, so we do R&D. But then I just got on Google, I learned so much about myself. I just captured that information to use it. I think the important thing is, as soon as you start a meeting asking somebody for something and you say 25%, 30%, as soon as you start with the percentage, they think you're smart.
Yeah.
It's literally Jedi mind trick. You could know one number. They're like, yo, this sister came in here today and she gave me a number. She must be smart. It's so crazy.
We need.
No, seriously. Like we talk about this, research is so important, but it's just like something simple.
Right.
Oftentimes can help you. So, I don't know how much time we have, but we'll take questions. I do want to ask this though, so just short answer to this. So, I was a corporatepreneur, right? Because I didn't really, I was just like, I like my corporate paycheck, and I became a full-time entrepreneur, but I learned so much in corporate America. Do you recommend people, I talked to the young brother here, people interning to like get big corporate ideas, big corporate people, you're building relationships as they're building, or is that wasting time because that's busy work? What's your thoughts?
Oh, no, I would say yes.
Okay.
I mean, the wealth gap, right? We're gonna talk about the wealth gap. The only thing that will close the wealth gap is generating wealth. Period. I mean, we can sit here and have all these fancy conversations about it. It's the only thing that will close it is to generate wealth. So, I think when I hear people say, well, if you want to build wealth, you got to build, you can't do the core, you have to leave, you can't have a job, or you can't leverage it. Some of the smartest people I know that have navigated business or that have even given me great advice have been people that have worked in corporate and have figured out or stayed there. And that's a sacrifice. And sometimes it's taking one for the team sometimes, right? Those are the people that you want to partner with and that you want to collaborate because they have access to a level of social capital that you don't. And then you can make a plan. Like I've literally done this. And I have a colleague, one of my good girlfriends, and she's here, but we've done this over the years where everybody has a part to play.
Yeah.
And for years, wherever she was in corporate, she leveraged it.
Right.
And we were intentional. And we had those conversations. And I'll leave with this. Out of everything we just said and talked about how everybody, we need more funding and we need this and we don't have access to this, we have enough. We really do.
We just gotta go.
We have enough. And I would encourage you to, when you're doing business with your colleagues or your friends or your family or people that you're in business with, have that equity conversation, you know, with them. Around that person that works in corporate that you want to build with and they have leverage to that. Don't go to them and ask them to do independent contract work for you. Give them equity. Have the equity. Pull out the cap table. Have a conversation of things that you're building. Like, we have to walk our talk. So.
Yes. Well, I think we're gonna open up for questions. Any questions?
Questions?
So I saw this the other day, I saw somebody say this, so I tell John to hold the mic, and I listen.
Drop it.
I can give comments or questions, or both, but the comments have to be quick, no entertaining.
I had a quick, just a quick question.
Can you name the class that you mentioned for the patent?
Or is it just, it's readily?
It's readily, go to the US Patent and Trademark.
Okay,
Go
it's
Google.
just classes.
And they have it's a patent and trademark, it's a course,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, thank you.
They change the link sometimes, so you have to like play around with the web. They don't put it in your face, is what I'm saying.
Right, thank you. All right.
I'm blind, so y'all gotta raise your hand if you have a question.
Other questions are percolating, I did want to just ask the two of you, because you talk about social capital, but I think the importance of relationships and social networks, like, I think sometimes we miss, we hear capital and we miss something. And so, all the folks that are in this room, all the relationships, and I think both of you, like I've seen, in spaces and places, and leveraging those relationships, like just talking to somebody, like, and then realizing, oh, they own this or they own that. Like, I think to just hit a little bit on social networking and relationships and never doing that. I will say this, I met Michelle with somebody, and I'm not gonna say who it was.
I'm going to, no, I'm not.
And the other person was really almost dismissive. And I was like, look, I like to know and meet everybody. And an opportunity would have been missed if I had been like, oh, I don't know her, I don't even try to talk to her.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, they always say.
First of all, don't dismiss people from Oakland, okay?
Yes.
Dismissing, okay? And Cheryl and I, we connected over that dismissal. Okay? That person's going to move back and come back this circle. But I do want to share this. So I heard so many impactful stories, and it was such a mind-blowing situation for me. So in 2021, a very untalented person fired me from a job, okay? He wasn't even worthy of my presence. It literally, I just took the wrong. First of all, I left the company, took the job because I was unhappy there. So never leave someplace because you feel forced out. Leave when you're ready and the right opportunity comes along. That's the first thing. So God will teach you a lesson. So I went to this place, got fired, it was all working. But anyway, somebody asked me the question about why I left, and I decided to be open and honest. I said, you know what? This is the first time in my life, I was over 50, I got fired from a job, whatever the reason was. That one post, that authenticity got me social capital because it took my following from LinkedIn from about 3,000 to 50,000.
Wow.
So now when I post, because of my honesty, authenticity, the way I framed it up, I'm from Oakland, I just like to keep it real. It literally, now people follow me, they want to understand me because I was honest with them. You have stories that if you're open enough to share because you know God will use you to do it, you can gain some social capital online instead of following people and posting your little outfit. Like, get some real, like literally we have stories and we've been through things that can help other people, and I'm telling you, can grow your footprint. And when you have that following, then you get paid a lot of money to go speak. Then you can write your book and you already have a following. Then you have an ingrown focus group to go get information.
There you go.
But we don't use our story, our trauma, our pain with good intention, and you get something good on the outside. So I wanted to share that because you brought that up, and I think that that's really important.
So my story is when I first started my business, I was afraid to put my face on it.
Yeah.
A lot of us experience that.
Yeah.
Come on, don't use your last name.
Don't use your last name or first name, Lakeisha.
Right.
Your last name you use all day.
Right, last name, right. You're French, it's also something.
Lay Keisha, I'm like, no.
I have let the lay pass. Exactly. But when you said authenticity
Yeah.
and faith
Uh-huh.
and trusting yourself,
Yeah.
trusting God's timing, whoever you serve.
Yeah.
But that was a journey. And so I would encourage everybody, as much as we're talking about wellness.
Yeah.
Wealthy people do something, and most of them that we see are white counterparts, but wealthy people do wellness well, right? The wellness leads to wealth.
Right.
The sustainability, even ideas.
Yeah.
You gotta be available mentally,
Yeah.
emotionally.
Yeah.
To your point about relationships, Cheryl, like if you meet people and you are not well, or in a place where you are available or accessible, energy speaks before you do.
Yeah.
And so, I would say in that, building relationships, your relationship with yourself first, and examine, be comfortable with who you are,
Yeah.
stand 10 toes down in who you are. But this is again going back to the Black GDP report and why we said the numbers, because we just wanted something also to be a gift to the Black entrepreneurial and innovation community, to give us something that's to be able to take that agency in your life and to have something as simple as, everybody you see talk about data all the time, and we don't have a lot of our history.
Right.
We don't have the data. So, but yet and still, we still create, we still innovate,
Right.
but progress, to your point. So I would say, put your name on your business, put your face on your business. Just want to be real, hold on this moment. Because I'm saying that, but I also remember a time, and I know that y'all go, and I remember going to events and seeing people speak on panels. I'm like, it's easy for y'all to say that because you're there already. And so I know when y'all walk out of here, there's some people who are like, okay, you said that, but for the next year or so, I'm not doing this because I'm making money. And I don't want to mess up my cash flow because I'm feeding my kids, I'm paying my bills, I'm doing this, and I don't know what that's going to do. But that healing process will get you to a point where you're able to then make that transition.
Yeah. You know what, this is like, thank you, we make a good team.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, and then we're gonna let someone ask another question, but in this moment, if there is anyone in here that is angry, that is holding a grudge against somebody, that can't get over something, I'm telling you right now, the Spirit has spoken, you need to leave it in this room, because God cannot fill you up unless you leave something behind.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
I really, really, really mean that, and I had to forgive so many people before God could give me all my gifts.
Yep.
I mean, bad people,
Yep.
people with no good intentions.
That's right.
But I just said, God, please just make their punishment bad so it'll make me feel better. But you know what I'm saying, okay? So thank you for that, opening that door up for that, because I think that needs to happen in this room. There's a gentleman right there.
I gotta tell the people we'll start here.
Uh-oh, okay.
Yeah.
We'll come to you, son.
Sorry, I was squatting before. This is a question about intellectual property. There is an open source movement, and I have mixed feelings about open sourcing things that you work towards, and I feel that the community that is promoting open source doesn't have an understanding of having ideas stolen and having your resource stolen. So how do you balance that when you're trying to protect your intellectual property, but also work with a community that largely wants to open source almost everything? So thank you.
What is open source?
Like free service.
Yes.
Like us. Like somebody.
Open source, it could be any, like even sometimes grant proposals, like you'll read that fine print. Sometimes they'll say like, they want all this information for you to fill out a proposal, and they'll say like anything you put, if you read the fine print. And it's just open, and so that trust and having your ideas stolen. So I'm gonna circle back to like relationships again, and then I think I heard you mention this earlier. Get an attorney in your network. So you talk about things to do when we leave here. Whether pro bono. This is part of like relationships, right? If you're at a place where you have something really good, and you're like, I don't know, I can't hold, I have to talk about it, right? Or there's some opportunities. And so, along with going to do customer discovery and all those things, an attorney and an accountant.
Yeah, that's it.
Because everything we just told you guys will do no good if you can't sustain it and if your books are not right. and if the back end and the operational part of the business is not, and that is going to come from relationships because a lot of us do not have the capital to be able to pay for it outright. And that's just the truth. I mean, until we do, but it's like we have to use relationships to get those things, but put them as a priority. Don't go working on an idea and putting up a website, and all of that does you no good if you don't know how to protect yourself. To your point, find a relationship, curate, a relationship with somebody, and share your story. Like, don't just make it transactional, but like, hey, I'm at this place, like I'm trying to do these things, but I'm really uncomfortable. And so, do you have any, advice and, or somebody else that may do it. And so sometimes that is the work. It's not just coming up with ideas and going to lunches with people. I can't tell you how many meetings that I've had. Be careful about that, Can I have, introductory calls and things like that when you talk about like being intentional with your time and it's not, and also so that you're not transactional, right? So if you're in a certain space and place, you want the people that you're spending time with to be people that you're able to fully lean into, and so that's mine. I hope that answers.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll say this real quick. So, I have I'm an entrepreneur, have a legit business model, have like literally millions of dollars in my pipeline. I'm not announcing to the world until February. Because I want a win under my belt. I want to be able to have a story to tell. I don't want anybody praying against me. So so you have to understand how important timing is as well, right? You got to build your board. I call it my personal board of directors. All my personal board of directors. Yes, my husband's an attorney, but one of my best friends, I don't even go to him because he goes, I got to take out the trash 10 times. I got to do all this stuff. I'm not doing that. But my girl Tiffany, she'll look over every employment contract, right? So you have to understand how to build your circle and who's willing to be on your team. And I guarantee you, if you search high and low, because that has value to it, an attorney might be $100,000. So you have to understand that's $100,000 your business just made because you asked somebody to help you. And women, sorry men, like we really do want to help one another. Like we really will give our time and services. So that's a great valuable point. So.
My question was, could you talk about why people are so afraid, not of failure, but of success? That is what, for me, I feel a lot of times I have ideas, but the fear of stepping out there and putting yourself out there.
Well, so I would challenge that, okay? And it's so funny. So I talked about my daughter in our earlier session, but I have a 16-year-old son who is like really great, a great student. And his second grade teacher said, your son has the fear of failure, so he won't try. And we're like, what? He can't, he didn't come from this lineage. We try everything. And the reason that is because, and then Lakeisha mentioned, is because our community is taught that we don't get a second chance.
That's right.
Because when we fail, we shouldn't even been hired. Not a bad day. Not that we shouldn't have been drafted. And I want every single person to get that out of your head right now. It's such a great question. Because my greatest lessons, I said when I got to Ebony and Jet was a CEO, I didn't hire the right operations person. And I left it up to someone else, but that position is so important. I should have taken that. So it was my failure. But let me tell you how I learned from that, and it made me a better executive person. We can't think our failure leaves us from the table. Right. Get that out your head. Failure makes us better. Like, period. The second thing is fear and faith can't live in the same body. Mm-hmm. It literally cannot. And when I read that scripture, when someone told me that, I was like, I let fear reside where my faith should be. And you gotta choose. Am I waking up today with faith? Or am I waking up today with fear? And every day you ask yourself and you make a decision, I'm walking with faith today. And when you do that and you say it, you move differently.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commanding and control. This is a lesson that I had to learn. And recently, I had gone through some experiences in motherhood. I had 2 very difficult pregnancies. My oldest son was a 1-pound preemie. I lived in the children's hospital for a year, slept on hospital room floors in the NICU. surgeries, everything. And so that put me in a place where I was trying to keep everything, I didn't have any control over that situation. And I just had to, lean on God. But what I did start doing was I started mistaking control for having command in my life. And I realized, like, if you're trying to control everything, you have command over nothing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right? And so we have the power and agency to direct our path and the trajectory that we're on, our businesses. So when you leave out of here, you have, my first program was called CEO of My Life, because I believe that.
That was my article when I got fired. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
I'm the CEO of my life. Go ahead.
And, but I remember walking around, like I would take the train over to New York and I would go to like the Twin Towers and stuff, and I would look up in New York and I would wonder, like, how do I become a part of this? And I realized like nobody was coming to save me. Or to come to like pull me in there, and like, it's gridlocked up north, it's like you can't get in. But that and some other things in my past, and in the sense of, abandonment from my biological father, all those things, I realized like I had this thing with like having a fear of people disappointing me, and all these things where I like kept things and compartmentalized in boxes. And when I realized like, okay, you think you control, like you're trying to control things, like I run a business, I'm an entrepreneur, like I know a lot of you feel this, like I'm doing this, and when I leave out of here, everything they said, I gotta write it down, but then I gotta go this, I gotta go grocery shopping, I have to go help take care of my mom, I gotta go check on my family, I have to take a step back and let go. We say let go and let God, like literally, like don't, like everything that we're saying doesn't mean you leave here and then try to go like, go crazy and controlling everything and trying to make things happen. Authenticity also means just showing, just being who you are and moving. That requires a level of being in touch with yourself. And so I know a lot of the times you sit and see people on panels, and I'm just saying this because I was that person before. And I would say, oh, they're saying this, they sound so authentic, but like once they leave here, I'm not gonna be able to contact that person. I'm not gonna be able to, and then they'll say, well, they don't really connect with you afterwards. But one thing I learned, I stopped complaining and started looking around a few years ago. I was like, what's the common denominator between all those people on those panels? Like, and I started like really like researching them, like really figuring out. And what I realized is that they take ownership, they bring value to whatever they do or wherever they come. So when Cheryl said relationships, you also can't expect to meet somebody, get their phone number, get their email, tell them about your business. You really need to go home and think about what value can I bring to this person. It don't have to be money.
Right.
Right? It's like, what value, what's your biggest pain point right now? What's the most painful thing like for you? And you're like, maybe I can help figure that out. I might not have this, I don't have the network you have, but I can help you do that.
Right.
We're literally the same person.
Mutual value. It's the mutual value exchange, but that is gonna help you. So when you look, don't feel discouraged or don't feel upset or angry, because when you feel like I can't, like I got this good idea and like I'm just this, and yes you are. We're no different than each other. But just bring value, and that's what I found once I started focusing on showing up with value and bringing value to the table. Every room I stepped in, owning your energy, owning how you like that, and you call it to you. You call it to you, and you'll start seeing that needle move. So
yeah, it's people always ask me like, why'd you write the book? I was like, I didn't really care if anybody bought the book, but I saw everybody sat on the panel had written the book, and so I just took 6 months. I said I could bust out a book because I know that that corny book they wrote, I could do just as good as that. Like the point is, Lakeisha is a great point, is you gotta understand the barriers to entry.
Oh, yeah.
And oftentimes they're not that big.
That's right.
They're like the difference between us, me, and you is I took 6 months to write 100 pages about my life from Oakland.
Wow.
And I maybe sold 5, 6, 7,000. I don't know. It wasn't a whole lot. People didn't like the time. I don't care. But what I get to go fly and speak is what I wanted.
Yeah.
And I paid attention to what the barriers to entry are.
Okay.
So, like, the point is you got to think about these little things that you're so distracted in your day to day, mired down with this and that, and the person from FedEx didn't get here on time, and you could have asked a simple question.
Yeah.
That's worth $1 million.
Right. Yep.
Like, literally.
Yep.
Any more Any
I
last
got a couple
question?
more
Madam?
questions, but since I have the mic, I want to ask this.
We just have a family time, we like a big family reunion right now. Don't feel bad if you gotta get up and go, even if you sit in the front row, we still love you, we understand.
Okay, I think this is important because it's community, and I hear you talking about the future. And I think we don't really talk about collaboration and partnership, what it really look like. We hear people on panels talk about, we need to collaborate, this is how we're gonna do it, work together.
Right.
But then in the community, it's not happening, it's more competition,
Right.
or more engagement, people now trying to see you advance over them. How do we do that? And I'll give them the question.
Hyper, write this down.
I'll write it for you.
Yeah, she gonna write it for me, go ahead.
Hyper interdependency.
Oh.
You gotta get in a place where you are comfortable, and that requires great humility, checking your ego at the door,
That's right.
where you, I remember, like, and to your point about like working on things, Future in Color, I started working on Future in Color at the end of 2019, right before the pandemic. So it's been almost 3 years. But I remember the people, and I could literally bring them up here on stage and they could tell you, the first thing I would say is, I need you. Like, I want to, like, a lot of times we like to show up and like, we rehearse what we're gonna say and like, oh, okay, we can't, like, you know, we gotta, you know, oh, here's my expertise and here's my thing and here's my, well, if we all could do, I mean, we wouldn't meet each other, we all would be sitting healthy and wealthy. But hyper, get to a place truly in your heart, not just saying it, but where you, like, only you and God know. And then like, I am in a place where I just want to be hyper interdependent. Like, we have to rely on each other on that type of level. Where we're the people that you're working with, working together with. When you feel like that, like, I don't move without this, like, I would never do something with Future in Color and not involve the many people that helped to build the foundation of it, regardless of what they're doing. I have this one person, her name is Blanca Catalina Garcia. I love her to death. She moved from Atlanta, she moved to Florida, her husband got a job at the university down here. And I call her like once a month. And I'm like, hey, Blanca. She's like, hey, Natisha. And so she told me, you know, she was just going through it with her family, you know, transitioning. But I promised her, I said, as Future in Color's building, I will not forget you. Like, I don't care what you're doing. You're in some form of way, I don't care if I'm getting, you know, from nagging. So one day she started crying. She said, I don't know, like, I did not believe you, but like, you truly like reach out, you make sure, because I never want somebody, but that hyper interdependent, because when I was at that point where I didn't know what to do, she created decks. She took my words, she spent hours on the phone with me when my kids were running around, and she wrote my thoughts down, because that's one of her gifts. I will never forget that, because I was hyper interdependent on her at that time. And so we just have to show up in that way, you know, constantly.
Yeah, it's a good point. I love that story. So as I'm launching this business, and it was my idea, it's my brainchild, 30 years in the business, and I called this woman to be my head of operations. And she goes, should I put that I co-founded the company with you? And I had a moment. I was like, hell no. And I was like, you know what? I said, we look stronger together. I said, yes, and we're co-founders. Now, I know that I did it, but the point is that if we're not caught up in our title, and we know that we're protected by paperwork based on the percentage of the company that I own and you own, what does it matter? If we're stronger together. So I think we have to understand, one, we can't do it by ourselves. Collaboration means that a group of people come together and we're stronger together, right? So you can't get caught up because you've never had anything that you don't want to give a little bit away. And our history, that's why I said our community isn't graduating. We're in this perpetual cycle of not getting what we're worth, and it's because we don't want to open up the door because we're so scarred that we're scared to let people in, even when we vetted them and know them and the Lord showed up and told us they're okay, we want to hold on because we've never had anything. And so I say we're worthy just because we are here, we know our value. You don't get to dictate what I'm worth. And I got caught up in a moment that I needed the world to know that I co-founded, that I founded it, that I this. But I was like, I don't need the world to know. I know what I'm going to be blessed with because I know who I am. And so don't you get caught up in the same foolishness.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brian Adam with the San Francisco Department of Technology. I guess I had a follow-up question to some things that Lakeisha mentioned regarding, I guess, finding out what minority-owned businesses kind of needed. When they started those businesses, what was the dollar amount they needed to kind of test their business model and get their customers? And I guess what I was wondering is, what can we do? How can we convince policymakers, voters to kind of support services or grants that are no strings attached, so we can just give businesses or people what they need to make things happen rather than jumping through X number of hoops?
I would say, you said what did you work for the Department of Technology? I would challenge you to go back to your department and to shift the way that you guys are looking at supporting minority businesses. So not giving money without strings attached, but again, how can we create more opportunities for wealth creation, access to wealth creation tools? So for instance, looking at your department and looking at the business model and the plans that you guys have, you have 3, 5, 10-year, 15, 20-year plan, starting at the root of it. Because a lot of times what we get is Band-Aids from organizations, right? All good intentions, right? Like we want to figure out how do we give, and I could give you an answer and I can run down some things for you. But what's more sustainable for our community in terms of support and what our future generations need is for you guys to rethink your entire business model and process and to spend time with entrepreneurs, talking to them. We're going back to customer discovery. So I would challenge agencies to do the same thing. Data's great and like the research we did is good, but things are changing so rapidly right now. And you also have to look at geographic location. And so I would just look at how you guys are doing things and how can we just disrupt this and to center those people in our process. Because I guarantee you, if you look underneath the hood, you're providing supports and giving support to entrepreneurs, but they're not centered in the way that the Department of Technology operates. If the future is color, and those statistics that I stated earlier about 2045 and 2050, then the Department of Technology should be thinking about what is our plan for 2045 for this new majority. Our entire department and our plan should be wrapped around this community. And how does that shift and change what we're doing today?
So listen, my daughter says that my husband's the smarter person, I'm the queen of hustle. So I'll take that title. So what I would say is this, like to me, to understand that it only takes $25,000 to get a minority business up and running is such an amazing opportunity because now we know the data. And people don't even want to visit the city of San Francisco because they think it's being run over by crime. Like the stories are, like I live in New York, they're like, you go to San Francisco? I was like, yo, I'm from there, don't talk about that. But what an amazing story to take a piece of data, $25,000, when you already have money sitting there and you're funding in a different model. So you take it, you have an opportunity to do something different, to see it, but you get an amazing story that maybe might want me to come, I might want to come visit here. Maybe I even want to start a business because you're doing something different because you sat in a room and got some data, you took it back to data. Did you know it only takes $25,000 for an entrepreneur based on 100, based on a black woman who started some company about the GDP? We didn't know they didn't even do that, what that meant. Like, do you understand what I'm saying? So there's an opportunity to be creative, but to get goodwill from a marketing perspective that makes your entire city look better based on a community that elected the last president.
Yep.
So it's how you spin the story, it's how you take the data back to tables if you have some power or you have somebody's ear and spin that to create something new and good and get goodwill out of it. That's the point of this conversation today.
That was really powerful. You know what? I think that a lot of the times that's where we get stuck. Like this conversation that just happened, because I was talking about the root, ripping it up from the root, which absolutely has to happen. But you were talking about like, what can you do now? Because we know you have a job to do and that the people you work with may not think like you. That's right. And they might not have the heart that you have. And you may only be there for a limited time. And so,
or the information, because I didn't even know
or the
that.
information. So how do we get things done, but at the same time, still addressing the root causes? So to me, agencies, that are supporting, like, we need to have more of these, because this is where it gets stuck, I think, a lot of the time, because you have some people on one side saying, equity, and we need to, tear up the whole thing, and then you have others putting Band-Aids on things and always suspend it, but instead, it should be a very strategic and intentional plan, and you're what I call a champion, right? And so we had something that we did a few years called the Champion Report, and we found that also in that data we did was that entrepreneurs could not identify an organization that really supported them. It was never the organization or the agency. It was a person that worked there. And they followed that person wherever they worked. And that's who helped them to sustain. So it's the champions, to your point, that can make that happen. But the champion also has to make sure that you're also a part of that root causes and tearing up those roots and learning how, to your point, to spin it, how to do that, plant those seeds, and get that done. That's an art and science.
All right, we have one quick question and we got a hard stop.
Okay, so I was listening to your response, Chantel Herndon, very nice to meet you, about the sister who said, I'm gonna be a founder with you. What if you're in a situation that's a little different, kind of, you've been championing along a business for a period of time, and when you come and say, well, I want a contract, I wanna be recognized, I deserve a title, and the response is, you've got social capital. You've been along on this ship with me, so that should be enough.
Right.
How do you then turn around and say, it's more than just that to me?
Yeah, I would say that everything you learn, start your own business, be their competition. Okay, Michelle, stop it. Listen, we pray for signs, we pray for discernment, we pray to understand the situation, and it's given to us, and we still question, why are we there? We still question why we're giving people something and they give us nothing in return, because we don't understand our own value. And when people show you who they are, we do what? We listen. We literally listen, and we thank them. So I have been in situations where I've given so much and so much and so much, and I'm begging to be seen, I'm begging to be compensated, I'm begging for parity. And when I realized that I'm Michelle B, a daughter of the Most High, I had enough courage and information to do it myself. I'm telling you right now, like, I don't know the situation, but if you have to sit here and ask the question, that person's not sitting there talking about, should I really give this person what they're worth? They're all moving their merry way. And so I would say, you're an A student, you sat up front, you've been taking notes. I can see how you move and shake, you notice, and you give people's attention when you walk in them. Stop begging for crumbs. Stop trying to hang on people's shadows. And now be smart about it, right? You don't just jump and get mad like I did and got fired. Don't do that. You know what I mean? But this is time, because you would be sitting here in this open room asking that question if it weren't. Yep. And now you got a sisterhood here. You could bounce ideas by us, and you could talk to us, and we really mean that. Like, you can't keep calling. You know what I'm saying? But you can at least 1 or 2 calls. You know what I mean? Anyway.
I'm good for a strong text. Because I get to look at it at my leisure, but like I done, right? Yeah, so I'm definitely gonna respond.
Good to know.
Give it up for Michelle.
I want to. Black folks always tell me or should I say elders? I don't know. I want to take it back to where Michelle started. So everybody was here raising your hand in the pledge, and I think what and I don't know if Saida wants to speak to this as well. I think we are always saying, like, let me take it all the way back, right? So I started my career as a kindergarten teacher in private school. And I realized in those spaces that I had access to things that I never had access to as a student growing up in Oakland public school. And so I made it a determination that the things that I had access to as a teacher in private school, I wanted to make sure that the kids, I worked in Pack Heights, I lived in Fillmore, and I was like, I want to make sure that the kids that are in the neighborhood where I live have similar experiences as the students where I work. And so when we come into these spaces like this, it may not seem like a big deal to folks, but it is not normal necessarily for the city to say we're going to put on something like this that is free of charge and that is about like helping people build their wealth. So I say all of that to say, like, we pull these together. First and foremost, I would say on a selfish level, I do it because I think these folks are amazing, and whether you know it or not, like Google them, they are in rooms and spaces connecting and rubbing elbows and having conversations with the folks that many of us may not aspire to be, but aspire to be like. Right? In turn, when I say like, I don't mean like their character, I mean that the things that they have access to. And so I want to make sure that when we do these things like this, I'm not necessarily saying like I'm coming to you next year and you have to tell me how much money you made after you came to this event, but I want you to be able to say what was the impact on me, and that ultimately when you all are impacted, it impacts community. So I was looking over something the other day, and I'm gonna like really go off on like a tangent, but it connects. So I was reading Pedagogy of the Oppressed the other day. And he talks about the dehumanizing effort, right? Where we get people in a place where they just get locked into doing the same thing over and over again, right? And that I can, in some ways, even in that instance, make you think like you're moving in a different way. But really, I still have created, as a teacher, something where, you know, you think you raised your hand and you just want to ask a question, but basically I set the foundation for you to know the rule is to raise your hand in order to be called on, right? So you're following a system of oppression in a way where you don't get to speak up. And that the question you're going to ask, you are wanting to ask a question that when after you say it, I go, good question, right? That we're always still moving towards that. And so the question that I have for you all today is like, how are you going to disrupt the system? Right? And sometimes I see Siobhan here, sometimes your disruption is a problem for me, but I do you, right? Because that's the whole point of it. That's the point of Pedagogy of the Oppressed, is that it is not supposed, if you do something that's a disruption and I'm cool with it, then probably chances are you're not really doing a lot of disruptions. Right? And so part of this today, part of why we are here is like, what are you going to do? This is not about like, just sitting here writing notes that next week you'll be like, what was that thing I went to last week? Too often we do that. So the question is, and I'm going to ask you all before we break out, like, look to somebody and actually say, what is the thing that you are going to do? Right? Whether it's personal, whether it is communal, whether it is about like disrupting the system, or just saying, I'm going to get up a little bit earlier every day and write a plan of action. Like, what is the thing that you're going to do? Because at the end of it, we can complain all we want to, but if we as individuals are not contributing to a change, then you can't complain about what everybody else is not doing. So I just want to make sure that before we leave here today, that you actually, and so this is what studies show, research and development has proven, that if you write something down, you are more likely to do it. If you say something out loud to somebody else, you are more likely to do it. So I'm asking you to do 3 things before we break out and close out here. 1, I'm asking you to write down what is the one thing that you are going to do, right? That is building on whatever happened here today. And maybe it's as simple as Googling something, or maybe it's as simple as building a network and leaving here with somebody's phone number or email address, right? So what's the one thing you're going to do? Then I want you to write it down. I want you to say it to somebody else, and then I want you to say it to yourself. Because all too often, like, we are ashamed or afraid to like speak things, and we've done this with young people where we're like, do something, tell us what your name, who you are, and what makes you special. And we have created a space where we are almost afraid to say what makes us special.
That's right.
Because we don't want somebody else to say, oh, that ain't nothing.
Yep.
Or you ain't nothing. But take a moment, write it down, tell someone, and tell yourself. And I'm gonna give you like 2 minutes, and there's enough people in here for everybody to say it to somebody else, right? Like that is the pledge in action. And again, give it up for Michelle. And you got 2 minutes, and then Chair Fox is gonna close us out. And then there's a bunch of snacks back there, so I see all y'all getting up. I ain't even put up the church finger, just got up. There are snacks and stuff in the back, and please take that bread, because if it's still there at the end, I know I'm gonna eat it, so. Not all of it.
I just wanted to add one more thing. I know there's not only Black people in this room.
Yeah.
I just wanted to call this out. And when we say the future is color, and how do we realize that? So one of the things is that we don't have the conversations amongst our communities of color about our lived experiences. So I know all of us are sitting here and everybody's been listening, but their feelings, their emotions, there are stereotypes, there are things that we don't understand about one another, and so we can't, I just wanted to, I don't know what this moved me to say that, but I'm looking out and I'm seeing people, and so this is not just a Black issue, right? Or not just work for Black people to do. Like when we say the future is color, it is all of us. And so one of the things we have to start doing is recognizing and holding space and honoring each other's lived experiences. Black people are not one type of people. Latino people are not one type of people. So I would just encourage you guys, like within this room as well, before you leave here, or when you go out and about, is to just take time, like when we talk about authenticity and building relationships. That doesn't mean just Black relationships or just that, but show up and be authentic and honor people's lived experiences. And if you don't understand it, ask the right questions.
So I'm gonna go ahead and let the chair close us out. Just 2 more things. So there is day 2 tomorrow is at SF Jazz Center. And then please, if you haven't, like we're planning lovely mixer food, all of that at City Hall right after the SF Jazz Center. And then tonight, for folks who are interested, HRC folks can raise their hands. We still have some community seats and tickets available for folks if you are interested in Nicole Hannah-Jones this evening. You just need to let us know ASAP because we have to put the names on a list. So thank you all so much. I want to have the chair close us out.
So I want to begin by bringing us all back to gratitude and being appreciative and valuing the incredible Dr. Cheryl Davis.
Yes.
Because she's amazing, and the Human Rights Commission staff are scattered about. If you could each one stand, please stand. They are amazing, one and all, and appreciate and be grateful. Because gratitude is truly the key to contentment. Now, you might not be happy, because that's overrated in our society, right? Just like we're over-pathologized and over-medicated. But being grateful is an amazing balm for us. We've heard a lot of different things, we've learned a lot, but I want to close us out with gratitude and acknowledgement. To acknowledge our ancestors means we are aware that we did not make ourselves. We remember them because it is an easy thing to forget that we are not the first to suffer, rebel, fight, love, and die. That's from our living saint, Alice Walker, who's right here in the Bay Area with us. Struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. Coretta Scott King. Our reparations committee for African American reparations here in San Francisco developed an ancestral acknowledgement that goes as follows. We honor the gifts, resilience, and sacrifices of our Black ancestors, particularly those who toiled the land and built the institutions that established this city's wealth and freedom, despite never being compensated nor fully realizing their own sovereignty. We acknowledge this exploitation of not only labor, but of our humanity, and through this process, we are working to repair some of the harms done by public and private actors. Because of their work, we are here and will invest in the descendants of their legacy. Lakeisha talked about the beautiful mosaic of participants today. I want to reiterate that anti-Black racism is deep. It's fundamental to American institutions. Anti-Black racism is deep. And what everyone in this room can do is love themselves and acknowledge their deep anti-Black racism. And that includes all of us who identify ourselves as Black. We remember our ancestral entrepreneurs as we talk about a pathway to parity. Mary Ellen Pleasant, William Leadsdorf, and in the 20th century, the Bell family. If you know, you know. What did we learn today? What are you writing down? There's a neuro-linguistic connection. Follow Dr. Davis's plan. What did we hear? Hyper-independency, collaboration. Stay silent until you have secured the bag. I heard that 3 or 4 times. Customer discovery, design theory. We have enough, we live in abundance. Overcoming poverty as a personality. Intellectual property is property, it's wealth. Social capital, networking, community, relationship building. Be honest, be authentic, take care of yourself, be well, be grateful.